Hello, Whiskey Club members. This is Trevor coming here live. This is officially marks the very first time that I've done a Whiskey Club call in a hotel room. Super exciting. I know everyone's on the edge of their seats. But I come to you live from Austin, Texas tonight. Here out visiting a couple of our restaurants in the area. As always, I am joined by the amazing Katie from Sazerac, and it's Katie O'Donnell, right? Yes, yep. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Katie O'Donnell from Sazerac, who we've had the pleasure of interviewing 2 times before, and this is I think this officially marks the I feel like it's like SNL. We need to give you like a jacket like for coming 3 times. So I'll start working on that ASAP. But before we let Katie introduce herself, I just want to thank everyone for joining us live. And just as a quick rundown, we're going to talk about our amazing Weller Foolproof pick this month. I had to smuggle some little small samples on my airplane because I was traveling. So I don't have my official bottle, but hopefully those that have it have been able to crack it. And we have a couple of cool prizes to give away tonight for the best questions of the night. So first place, you're going to get a Buffalo Trace cooler bag, a Weller cocktail kit, some Weller glasses, and some Weller Lewis ice bag to make some crushed ice at your home bar. That's going to be our first place prize. And then our second place prize will be a Weller waxy cap, a coffee table book that's Kentucky Bourbon Whiskey and American Heritage, a Buffalo Trace tote bag, and then a t-shirt. So a couple great prizes to give away tonight, and looking forward to your questions. And before I let Katie introduce herself, I just want to quickly bring some attention to the situation that is happening in Maui and Lahaina. I was actually in Maui when the fires took place, and it just was a devastating event. And I can use my platform, as small as it may be, to bring attention to a good cause. I highly recommend donating, if you can, to some charities that are going to help Maui recover. We are partnering with Maui Brewing Company here to do a fundraising event coming sometime, hopefully in October, with a relief beer that they're brewing, where all the proceeds will be donated to some charities there to help Maui recover and get back. So again, if you can donate, please do so. And it's a cause that's close to me. I love the Hawaiian Islands, and we need to help them. So without further ado, Katie O'Donnell, please introduce yourself to everyone, and tell us who you are and what you do for those that maybe are new to the club and haven't seen you on here before.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Trevor. Pleasure to be back, and I look forward to a nice. I'm in the cool kids club now with Eureka. I'm into it.
You've been in there for a while.
I love it. I'm so excited. So hey everybody, my name is Katie O'Donnell. I am the national brand ambassador for Buffalo Trace Distillery, and I am serious when I say I have the best job in the world, in my opinion. I am very blessed. I have worked with Sazerac for 6 years now, and for the last 2 years, I've been extremely focused on Buffalo Trace and representing all of our amazing bourbons and ryes that come out of the distillery. So I love my job. It's great. The whiskey speaks for itself, and I just get to tell the stories of, why we make our whiskey the way we do, and who are they named after, and why are there so many names of whiskey that Buffalo Trace makes. And it's my favorite thing in the world to tell stories about. So that's a little bit about me. I live in Southern California, but I am, as Trevor called me earlier, a road warrior. So tonight I am in Breckenridge, Colorado. I just landed here from Las Vegas this morning, and it's a great life. So I'm really pumped, and Weller Foolproof is an absolute stud of a bourbon, and I'm so excited that you guys have a bottle to enjoy, and I can't wait to hear about the tasting notes and a little bit about your experience from picking the barrel and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, no, obviously an amazing bourbon, and there was a lot of excitement around this release. So congrats to all those members that were able to secure a bottle. We did have a little bit of excess. When we buy barrels, every barrel yields a different amount. So we have 1,200 members in our club. So we always order enough barrels to make sure that we have at least 1,200 bottles. But a lot of times we'll have some extras. So we will be releasing those extra bottles available to members who have been with the club consecutively for 1 year or more. So if you are in that category, you should have got an email today that announces when that will go on sale. I can't say when that will go on sale because it's for those people only. But again, being in the club, you got one bottle of Weller Full Proof. I think that's pretty awesome, considering how hard it is to find. So I poured my first pour, and we'll talk about my fancy hotel plastic cup. Normally I'm out of a Glencairn or something, but tell us a little bit about the Weller brand, like, where it started, who Weller was, and how this brand has just arguably become one of the most popular bourbon brands in the entire world.
Yeah, we're very blessed to be able to produce and represent this brand. Weller is a wheat bourbon. So we actually have 3 mash bills at Buffalo Trace. Mash bill number 1 is Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, E.H. Taylor, and Stag. Mash bill number 2 is our single barrel lineup. So you have Blanton's, Rock Hill Farm, Elmer T. Lee, and Hancock Reserve. And then our 3rd mash bill is what we'll talk about tonight, which is our wheat bourbon mash bill. So we're still using 51% or more corn, much more corn than that. But we take out the rye that we use in the other 2 recipes, and instead we use wheat. And the reason we do that is because of a gentleman named William LaRue Weller. William LaRue Weller was a wholesaler in the late 1800s, and he would sell his whiskey by horse and buggy, and he was known for having wheat in his whiskey. He was one of the first people in the United States to not use rye. Rye was a really common ingredient because people who were immigrating here into the United States were familiar with the grain. Wheat is something that wasn't really familiar to a lot of people. So it was a new innovation at the time and something that really took off. And it's the flavor profile tends to be a little bit more approachable for especially new bourbon drinkers. It has this, I always think about it like if you're talking about bread, like cornbread is really sweet, rye bread is spicy, and wheat bread is this soft, fluffy cloud, and it's really approachable, and it has a really beautiful mouthfeel. So we are so happy to be able to produce this. Now, we have not always owned the brand Weller. So there's a little bit of backstory to that. So William LaRue Weller was a wholesaler, and he's, pushing his whiskey out there, selling it. Everyone's loving it. He actually had a salesman who was a very, very popular gentleman and very good at his job, and his name was Pappy Van Winkle. So Pappy Van Winkle and William LaRue Weller were partners, and they were working together selling this wheated bourbon, basically, but way before bourbon was even called bourbon. It was a wheated whiskey. That's what they were calling it. And the 2 of them together, actually, when William LaRue passed away, the Van Winkle family and the Weller family stayed very close together. And after Prohibition, they actually opened their own distillery called Stitzel Weller Distillery. And that's where Weller was being made, as well as the Van Winkle line. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that Prohibition was the worst time in history for bourbon, but actually it was the 60s and the 70s because people were just really not consuming a lot of dark spirits. So, very interestingly enough, we at Buffalo Trace were so blessed to be able to push through that time period, and we kept our doors open. But not every distillery was so lucky, and Stitzel Weller was one that fell during the 1970s. It had been sold off to a large company from the families, and they did not want to sustain the brands. So they started to sell off the brands that were made at Stitzel Weller. You had Rebel Yell, Cabin Hill, Weller, Van Winkle, and Buffalo Trace Distillery in the early 90s got the opportunity to purchase the Weller brand. And so we've been making it ever since, and we're really, really proud of it. We use the original recipe, and it is exactly the same mash bill that we use for Pappy Van Winkle as well.
That's awesome. You have your horse and buggy parked outside your place in Breckenridge, right? That's how you're getting around?
Definitely later. With a big barrel of whiskey, I'm going to thieve it out straight from the barrel, just like the old times.
So again, if you've been a member for a while, some of these questions may sound familiar than when we've talked to Katie before, but I always like to ask them because I feel like they're interesting for people that maybe haven't been part of the club for that long. But you mentioned that Weller and Pappy use the same mash bill. There's in the whiskey circles, it's common for people to refer to Weller as poor man's Pappy. I guess how is that differentiation made as far as what gets, because it's the same whiskey, it's the same mash bill. Obviously the age statements are going to be different, but how is it determined what juice is going to go towards the Pappy line and what juice is going to go towards the Weller line?
Yes. So that is a very common question. And the way that the brands are managed right now is Weller is owned by Sazerac outright. We own the brand, and we forecast on the brand. We choose our flavor profile for the brand, and Harlan Wheatley, our master distiller, and Drew Mayville, our master blender, they work together to find the barrels that fit the Weller flavor portfolio that we're looking for. And they do tend to be younger, other than Weller 12-year. They're all between 6 to 8 years, every single Weller SKU, except for the 12-year. The CYPB can be a little bit older sometimes as well. But for the most part, they're all the same age range, and we're just playing with the proof of the Weller. Now, when we talk about the Van Winkle line, the Van Winkle line is actually still owned by the Van Winkle family. So we are technically contract distillers for the Van Winkles. We brought the Van Winkle brand over in 2001 to the distillery. Mark Brown, our former CEO, had to ask more than once if they would let us make their whiskey for them. And I'm glad he persisted, because now we are so blessed to be able to produce this. Now, the Van Winkle family have been known for their ultra aging. That's kind of the stamp. So if you look through history, you'll see these bourbon icons that, Booker Noe have like a really high proof bourbon. And then you have people that, like the Van Winkle family, that really focused on extra aging. So we do reserve the age statements that are 12 and over, or 15 and over, for the Van Winkle line. And the Van Winkle family does all of their choosing of their barrels. So they do work with Harlan and Drew as well, but they're going for a slightly different flavor profile. And especially when you get into older whiskeys, you're going to have to kind of change your tactic in order to make something that is sustainable, because you don't have a lot of yield from older barrels, and also really flavorful, even though it's been sitting in a barrel for 20 plus years. So those are the biggest two differences.
And who is the person from the Van Winkle family? Is it I believe, is it Preston? Is that who it is? Is he the one that's doing the selection? I know there's some granddaughters of the family that are involved as well.
I believe it's Preston and Julian right now. I know, there are women who are involved, and they have like their whole Pappy and Company line that is completely separate from Buffalo Trace, but the family does a really good job of branding their legacy.
That's awesome. Sorry, give me 1 second here. I apologize. So you talked about, kind of during the 70s and 80s, whiskey obviously saw a decline. And have you had, I've seen obviously in certain, social media and stuff, of people finding these old bottles. Have you had the pleasure of, I'm sure you have, tasting any of these old expressions from those times? And how do you feel the whiskey is it similar? Is it different to what's being released today? And I've never had the luxury of tasting some of those older bottles, but I've definitely seen it, and I'm curious on your thoughts if you've been able to enjoy them.
Yes, I have had one Weller Antique that was, I believe it was from maybe the late 60s, and also it's been sitting in a bottle for a lot longer, so it's a little bit tempered and a little bit different. But the flavor profiles are very, very similar. And I bring out the Antique 107 portion of it, because the original proof of the wheated whiskey that William LaRue Weller was selling was 107. So we keep that to be true. And so I think when you are looking at those older bottles, if you do have the opportunity, don't judge it against a Weller 12-year. Don't judge it against a Weller Special Reserve. Really take the opportunity to put it next to the 107, because that is, we really wanted to focus on that flavor profile being an antique throwback. And they are similar. I think there might be a touch of difference. I mean, aging in different climates, even within Kentucky, you go from Bardstown to Frankfurt and you're in a completely different climate. So if we were to age Buffalo Trace in Bardstown, it would probably taste very different than when we age it in Frankfort, Kentucky. And so I think that's something we have to also keep in mind when we're talking about flavor matching these bourbons, because the recipe can be exactly the same, like it is for Van Winkle and Weller, but where you put the barrels and how they're treated can totally impact so much of the flavor. So keep that in mind when you are comparing and contrasting older bottles to new bottles. But I think that we did a very good job of keeping the through line. And I'm sure some people will say, "Oh, absolutely, the old juice is better." Like you said, I'm not drinking multiple bottles of it, so I don't feel confident in making an assumption.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it before with other people on the call, but I'm a big advocate of both older as far as an age statement go, and also older bottles aren't necessarily always better than something that's aged less or something that's released sooner. Just going back to the kind of the selection between Weller and Pappy for a second, when is that decision made? Like how often are those barrels tasted? Is Harlan looking for certain flavor profiles to differentiate the two? And if so, do you know what those flavor profiles are? I'm just curious on kind of when that decision is made. And because from what I understand, that when the decision is made, barrels are moved to a different area in the distillery for Pappy versus Weller. And I'm just curious on when those whiskeys are tasted and that decision's made to you know.
Yeah, I've never been present for it, so I need to get on them for that. I want to go barrel tasting with the crew, you know.
Invite me
So
if you get the chance.
okay, perfect. We can have a field trip. Yes. I would say that I don't know exactly the flavor profiles that Drew and Harlan are going for. They are not that they're tight-lipped, but they just like we don't really talk about a lot of kind of the behind the
Industry
scenes stuff.
secret, real thing.
Yeah, we have a lot of proprietary information at the distillery, like our mash bills aren't disclosed, a lot of things like that. So that kind of sits with that. They're very protective over that. But to your point where, yeah, once you earmark a barrel that has been identified as, oh, this is going to be aged longer, this is aging well, we want this to sit in this barrel for more than 12 years. We have recently created a new warehouse called it's Warehouse P. It's not a new warehouse. It's one of our concrete warehouses. It's one of the original 14 aging structures on the property. So that warehouse, we did an experiment about 5-6 years ago, right when I started with Sazerac, where they took a little portion of the bottom of the warehouse and they made it a refrigerator. Because if you look at Scotch whiskeys, they're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And in bourbon, once we get to 25 years in that natural climate, the barrel's empty. It's evaporated. And so how can we counteract basically Mother Nature and try to get more yield and keep the flavors where we like them? So Warehouse P has now become the entire first floor is a refrigerated warehouse, which is really exciting. So yeah, we do take those barrels that are probably, I would say they probably rotate. When they go into that warehouse, it's done once a year. Like I don't think it's an ongoing thing, but they make that decision. And since the Van Winkle line is only released once a year and it's released in December, I think that starts to be more Pappy time, if you want to call it, in early September. So we kind of start to see, okay, what barrels are going to be dumped for this year's release and where are they going to come from? And if something is really aging well, that's probably when they make that decision to move it as well, if they want to age it up a little bit more. Weller is released more on the regular, so that one is probably more ongoing, and we don't need to put Weller into a refrigerated situation because we're not going over the 12-year age statement. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So I know Buffalo Trace has recently expanded quite a bit. I was able to go there. Last time I was there was a little over a year ago, but it's expanded quite a bit. How obviously I know a lot of the whiskeys you release are hard to find, allocated, and obviously delicious. As far as the timeline goes, obviously whiskey needs to age. Like how long do you think before we will see more Weller in the market or more Pappy? Or obviously, I know, again, Pappy 15 is going to take 15 years, but
Yeah.
the Weller stuff, like, I mean, what's the projections from the distillery on maybe
Yeah.
it being more readily available?
So we did do a $1.8 billion expansion. Just for your reference, I'm gonna just circle back really quickly to during like the 70s and 80s at the distillery. I heard this tour guide tell me that they made about 13,000 barrels in 1 year during that time period. Last year we made 250,000 barrels. So those are really the dark times.
Just a
So
little increase, nothing big.
so we are making more than we used to, um, but it's still not enough. And so we did have this expansion project, $1.8 billion investment from Sazerac company, which is a family-owned company out of New Orleans. So the Gold Rings actually wrote us a nice check to go do that. So we were very thankful because now we can bring more bourbon to you. The expansion, what it included was, step one was, all right, if we make more whiskey, where are we going to put it? So we purchased 300 acres of land just above the distillery. It overlooks the original grounds. And our goal is to build 30 new warehouses on that property. Each of them will hold 58,800 barrels of whiskey. They are as large as a football field and 7 stories tall. So there are going to be a lot more coming, but we started this project in around, I would say 2018. 2019 was probably like around when they started to fill those warehouses. So Benchmark might be coming out within the next year or two out of those warehouses, which is a 4-year-old aged whiskey. But for Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, the Wellers, I think we're gonna need to see at least another. I mean, every year we increase our projections and we're able to increase what we are producing, but I don't think it will be for another probably 2 years that we really feel things start to flow a little bit more readily and a little more freely throughout the country. So the expansion is great, but yes, to your point, we have to wait. We have to be patient. We don't want to rush it. We don't want to change Buffalo Trace to being a 4-year-old whiskey. We don't want to change Weller to be that, because that's not the consistent flavor profile that we are so proud of and that wins us so many awards. So patience is key, but the rest of the expansion is now all complete, believe it or not, except for some warehouses. I think we have 17 of the warehouses built right now. So it would take 4 weeks to build a warehouse and 4 weeks to fill. That was kind of the cadence that we were going through prior to all of our new equipment. So we now have a place to put the barrels. Now we have to increase our capacity to fill those barrels. And so Buffalo Trace is a National Historic Landmark. So we can't change very much about the structure of the buildings that are there. They are protected, and we want them to stay that way. They are a huge part of our history. So we had to do some little interesting heavy lifting, we'll call it, in our fermentation room, so our original fermentation house was built by Albert Blanton in 1935. It holds 12 fermenters that are 92,000 gallon tanks. We have the largest fermentation tanks in the bourbon industry. We're really proud of that.
Amazing sight to see.
Yeah. So we that wasn't enough though, because now we need to make twice as much bourbon. So we built 12 more replica fermentation tanks of those 92,000 gallons, but we put them in the back of warehouse A, which is now our visitor center. And to hold 92,000 gallons of liquid is a lot of weight. And Kentucky sits on a limestone bedrock. So it is porous. We had to actually drill down about 40 feet into the bedrock to get these fermentation tanks to be stable. And then they're 3 stories tall, and you can drive a Mack truck through them. They're massive. They were too tall for warehouse A, so we actually raised the roof on warehouse A by like 9 feet or something like that. Yeah, literally like lifted it up to make room for these new fermentation tanks. So once that was finished, we were like, okay, now we feel confident we need to go back and look at our cookers. So we ended up actually getting bigger cookers, more cookers. And we recently just switched from coal to recycled steam, which is really awesome because we are becoming way greener in that aspect. And I'm so proud of the distillery for doing that. And it's a wonderful thing. So those cookers are now being powered by that. And then the last, like the missing ingredient, was the still. So our still that we use, we had one still. It was built by Albert Blanton in 1935, and it's 4 stories tall, 7 feet in diameter. And so we built an exact replica of the still. it has new shiny copper on the exterior, but we even went around and found all the dents in the original still and replicated them on the new one. Yeah, so
Really?
you never know what's going to impact the bourbon.
All
So
right, that's funny.
we need consistency, and so
So you
that's up
literally
and
just
running.
make imperfections in it.
Yep,
That's
yep,
funny.
yep. Buy something brand new and bang it up a little bit to make it taste good. But that still went live in January. So we went from producing about anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 barrels per day. We've doubled that. So now we can produce up to almost 3,000 barrels a day. Very exciting.
Yeah, we look forward to more delicious bourbon.
Yeah,
Um,
just keep drinking it and be patient.
yeah, that's what my wife tells me all the time. Just keep drinking and be patient. Um, you mentioned some awards, so I wanted to call out that back, I think at the end of June, you guys were named the best bourbon in the world according to the Ultimate Spirits Challenge. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what that's meant to the distillery and kind of how that came about? Because obviously, I think it's an amazing bourbon. I think it's definitely up there with the best bourbons in the world, but you were named the best bourbon in the world. So how'd that come about?
Yeah, well, we are the world's most award-winning distillery. That is our claim to fame of us. Yes, thank you very much. So we're not shy to submit for awards. Like we're very proud of what we make, and we really like to hear the feedback too. Like it's helpful, right? If a lot of people are like, "Oh, Buffalo Trace won again," I'm like, "Great! That means we're doing our job and everything's consistent, and we're staying true to everything that we've done so far."
Yeah.
In 2008, actually, we became the first distillery in the US to win Distillery of the Year through Icons of Whiskey. And prior to that, no one in the US was really on a global market for whiskey production. It was very much centered in Scotland, as most would think. And the Irish have a big claim to whiskey as well. And the Japanese came in, and America kind of got pushed away on the global scale. So we are super proud of that award. We've actually won 8 times since then. And it's something that's very, very important to us. We are dedicated to consistency and quality, and yeah, we don't think that we have actually made the best bourbon yet. So we are still actively experimenting all the time, and hopefully one day some of our new bourbons will also make that list and get some really cool awards through experimentation, and we can continue to raise the bar not only for ourselves but for the industry as a whole. I think it's really fun to see. So we are so proud of those awards. And Eagle Rare is actually our most awarded bourbon, believe it or not. Which is, I mean, you can totally believe it. It's Eagle Rare. It's stellar, fantastic, beautiful, mature whiskey. Then our antique collection does very well. Always, William Lou Weller scores very well. And I mean, everything. Weller CYPB has done extremely
Buffalo Trace
well.
is just
Yeah.
amazing by itself. I was here at my hotel last night just drinking Buffalo Trace and down at the bar.
Yeah. It's great bourbon at a great price.
Yeah.
As long as you can find it.
And I think it's I'm going to give away something a little bit here, but next month we do have a double feature of 2 barrel picks next month. Each member will get 2 bottles included in the price of their membership, but you will be getting a Eagle Rare barrel pick, which is very exciting because Eagle Rare's harder and harder to find now, as well as a Buffalo Trace barrel pick. So you'll be getting 2 bottles next month, back-to-back Sazerac. I just like the way that sounds. And so you heard it here first. Next month, members will be getting 2 bottles included in their bags of both store picks from Buffalo Trace and Eagle Rare. So super fun.
That's awesome. And definitely those of you who partake in that tasting, tasting those 2 side by side is one of my favorite journeys to go on. Believe it or not, if you want to be a taste tester at Buffalo Trace, the first thing you have to do is be able to identify all of our own whiskeys, and some people don't identify them correctly, even though they work there. So I always think it's fun when you can do that at home. Kind of, you don't necessarily have to have a blind tasting the first time, but maybe follow back up after you taste them through and say, oh, can I really identify the 2-year age difference in this mash bill? Like,
Yeah, and save some of your Weller too. Taste them
Yeah.
side by side. I had one of our community's so great. I had one of our members send me 4 different samples of we just released an Taylor's single barrel pick. As far as a kind of an exclusive thing to some of our members. And he sent me 4 different samples. One was ours, and then 3 of them were other ones he had gotten throughout the years. And just an amazing member of ours. And he's like, I want you to blind taste them, and I want you to guess which one's yours. And I guessed initially, I guessed wrong. And I said, give me another chance. Don't tell me the answer. And then I want to taste them tomorrow. And I tasted them the next day, and I was very proud of myself. I picked my second attempt. I picked the one that was ours. So blind tasting to me is so much fun. And I think a lot of the barrel selection when it comes to picking barrels, you have to trust your palate, and you have to rely on what you like. So I think that's a good segue into. And Katie, I'm sorry, we're going to be. I know you don't have access to the bottle, but I'm sure you've tasted it, barrel picks many times before. So again, as always, if you're tasting your Weller Full Proof tonight, hopefully you're drinking out of something better than my little plastic hotel cup. But the whiskey should taste amazing regardless. Feel free to share what you taste. I will say this: we've had a lot of requests for future Sazerac picks to put the barrel number on our sticker, and we are going to not this year, but the next year's picks, we are working on making that happen, so you kind of know, compare and contrast what barrels you're tasting. But as always, please chime in the comments what you taste from your barrel. And as I always say, you may not taste something, but the moment you see someone else say it, you're like, oh my God, yeah, I taste that as well. So for mine, I'm getting just a lot of some wood spice off of the nose. I get a lot of like dark cherry, some vanilla.
I feel that cherry on the nose is so Weller to me. It is just like the stamp of the brand. So, and it varies, right, when you're doing single barrel picks as well. But that is something that I always look for when I'm drinking Weller, is that beautiful dark cherry fragrance.
And I just love what wheat does to the mouthfeel of a whiskey. It really adds this kind of silky, velvety, as to use your words, it's like a fluffy cloud, or like snuggling up with a nice warm blanket. It kind of just like makes my mouth feel like it just is very soft on the palate, and just it sits very well. A lot of like vanilla cream and caramel, just like classic bourbon notes, but they're just so pronounced and so delicious. Like, it's just, to me, this is like, I don't want to say perfect, but it's damn near close to a perfect bourbon, in my opinion. I do want to get to I know we have a lot of questions. We probably one of our whenever we do Weller, it's probably one of our biggest turnouts for people watching live. I do have a couple more questions for you. You did just release a brand new whiskey in the Weller line. I'm not sure if many people know about it. I don't really know much about it, and I was hoping you can enlighten us. If you're lucky enough to find the bottle, maybe you should play the lottery the next day, because I know they're hard to find.
Yeah.
Daniel Weller, tell us what Daniel Weller is, and how that came about, what the whiskey is, what makes it amazing. And to my knowledge, it's probably the most premium release of Weller as far as price point goes. So what makes it so great?
So this is a fun project that Harlan started many years ago. I believe this Daniel Weller was I believe it's like a 12-year, I think. And so what Harlan did was he said, you know what if, so we use red winter wheat for our
That's how
Weller
the
line.
best ideas start, right?
What if? What if we ran out of red winter wheat, or something happened like phylloxera that attacked this grain that we identify as our core ingredient? What would we do? And does it make a difference if we use a different style of wheat or a different species of wheat? So this is a Harlan experiment. The Daniel Weller line started off as that. We did not know the name of the brand while he was doing this. It was literally just he was going out and sourcing different strains of wheat and making the exact same recipe, but switching out the wheat. And what he noticed was there are remarkable differences, actually.
And
And
you've
if
been
you,
doing this for the past 12 years?
yes, Harlan's been hard
Sneaky,
at work.
sneaky.
Yeah, they're sneaky. Yeah, that's why I said everything's proprietary over there. They don't even tell me. They know I have a big mouth. They literally tell me. I get my education the day of the press release. Like, they don't tell me anything in advance. So, but the Daniel Weller, that was how it originated. So there will be more releases of Daniel Weller with different wheat varieties. So keep your eyes open.
Is
Um,
Emmer wheat?
Yes, this
What's
first one is
Emmer wheat?
Emmer. I really don't know. I haven't done my research. So you guys, your Google brains are going to be as good as mine at this point. I did have the opportunity to taste the Daniel Weller, and I can tell you that it is a remarkably different flavor from the core Weller. It is much softer, much softer. It's like, I don't really know how to describe. It's just it's a really delicate bourbon, and I already think that wheat leans itself to that, but this goes even a little bit farther. It's a really, really precious, pretty bourbon. Like it doesn't really pack you a punch, and it's also proof down to 90, so you get to really experience those flavors. While you guys are having 114, so you get to explore your own proofing down. But for that one, we did proof down, so you could that was the point where we liked, or Drew and Harlan liked, the flavor of the Emmer. So that was the conception of the brand, and then naming the brand was a whole other thing. So we kind of did some deep dive history. We have a bourbon archaeologist on site. His name's Nick LaQuente. He's in
Bourbon archaeologist. Is that like
Yes.
a drunk Indiana Jones?
Oh my gosh. Not quite. I love that. I mean, I guess it could be. Nick came on board when we were discovering what we would call Bourbon Pompeii, which is the original remnants of OFC, A.H. Taylor's distillery from 1878. So Nick came on board and he went through our archives. We have so much information. And we're like, well, what's the history of Weller? Let's dig into his past. And Daniel Weller was actually the family member of the Wellers who settled the family in Kentucky. So
Okay.
if you get a bottle of Daniel Weller, you'll notice the top is a compass. And when you open the bottle, on the inside are the coordinates for the original Weller property in Kentucky.
So who is Daniel in relation to William LaRue?
I think he was his great grandfather.
Daniel was William LaRue's great grandfather. Okay.
Yeah. So we're talking late 1700s. Settling Kentucky. Yeah. So Kentucky became a state in 1792. So around that time period when people were settling in the area was when the Wellers first stepped foot there. So, and the idea of exploration, right? And going into new grounds was kind of how the marketing came about with using Daniel. So yeah, that's that.
Awesome. All right. Before we get into questions, you had selected some songs. If you have not listened to the Whiskey Club playlist, there's a new thing we started this year. We released we released the playlist finally after we felt we had a decent amount of songs on it. This is a playlist that we've been working on where we're asking our people we're interviewing to select some songs that they feel encompass the whiskey itself. So tell us about your songs and why you picked them. I will be honest with you. I have not selected my songs yet. I will select a few. This is my first crack of this bottle, so my brain's already working on what I'm going to choose. But tell us about the two songs you picked and why you picked them.
Sure. So this was a fun assignment, I have to say, Trevor. Thank you.
Unique, right? Have you ever been asked this before?
I have not been asked this before. So it got my brain thinking a lot. And so the first song I picked was Slow Motion by, and it was, by Juvenile, if you listen to the lyrics of the song, it's like, you really like how slow and, just chill that the entire atmosphere is of the song. And so that was to me, whenever I drink a proof whiskey that's at 114, right? It's
Promotion
uncut.
by Juvenile. Let's clarify.
That's a Juvenile, right? Well, who's the? I'm sorry. I literally was like in Vegas last night picking my song, so that also might have had a little influence into that choice. But being 114 is really not normal for a bourbon, and I think that you should drink it slow, and I think that you should not shoot it right back, and you should take your time, and you should have a full experience and really enjoy the flavor and enjoy the taste. So that's why I chose that song. The second song I picked is Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor. Because
R.I.P.
I know, but incredible, like it just clicked when I was listening to it last night. To me, the Weller Foolproof, like nothing compares to that at 114. I love Granddad 114, old Granddad 114, but
Yeah.
nothing compares to Weller 114 in my opinion. So those are my two songs. I'm gonna try to play this a little bit more and exercise my creative, inspiration juices. So you've sparked some interest in me, and I'm gonna definitely download your playlist and play along.
All right. Well, I will come up with a couple songs as well. I apologize for not being prepared for the call, but I think you chose two perfect songs that I think have great explanations, and I agree. Nothing compares to you.
So good.
All right, we're gonna dive into some questions here so we can choose some winners. We got a lot of questions. All right, Clark White asks, as a brand ambassador for some of the most sought after whiskeys, what is one thing you can share with us that we may not know about Buffalo Trace or Sazerac?
Whew, that's a tough one. All my proprietary information that I don't know. I think so with Buffalo Trace at the distillery, if you haven't been there, you have to go, because every single time I'm there, I discover something new. And what I love about it is
you're Disneyland of whiskey distillery.
Yeah, you're living or you're experiencing so many important parts of bourbon history while you're on that property. So here's what I really like. When you go to the distillery, my advice is wander around. Everything has a plaque on it that it describes when it was built, what it was built originally for, and then you can see what it's been used for today. But I think that we have those little Easter eggs all over Buffalo Trace Distillery, and it's very important. So you can see there's a whole garden area right next to Albert Blanton's statue. There's a bunch of statues all over the place, but there's a garden area that talks about the McAfee family, who are behind Benchmark bourbon, that I think a lot of people don't necessarily dig into, right? It's Benchmark, and maybe it falls off of some people's radar because it is a 4-year-old bourbon and we talk about aging, all these things, but that family had such an influence, and how our connection to them is there. So I think you have to go to the distillery, and you have to, don't be afraid to explore. You can. We actually are, I can never say this word right. Oh my God, I'm gonna be so embarrassed. An arboretum, is that how you say it? Like a botanical garden? Yeah. So we are a level 2 arboretum, like certified.
Really?
Yeah. Albert Blanton, when he built the distillery, a lot of he built the house that my office, it's a bar, is in at the distillery, and he built so many different buildings around there, and he also lived on property. So he built a garden of beautiful botanical indigenous Kentucky, plants and trees. And now you can actually take a tour throughout the year where you get to go see all these different trees, or just wander around, you guys. Like, please wander around the distillery when you're there. If you're not supposed to be somewhere, someone will catch you.
I actually, one of the, I've told the story before, I think once. The first time I ever went to Buffalo Trace was, I think, in 2015 or something like that. And we were walking around the property, and I gained a nickname that some people still call me to this day in our company. And it was Commodore Richard Taylor, I believe. There was some plaque that said Commodore on it. And my boss at the time was like, "Oh, Commodore, you look like a Commodore, Trevor." And since then, many people affectionately refer to me as the Commodore within our own company. So I randomly gained a nickname just walking around Buffalo Trace, 8 years ago. So
it's super cool. And also I was just going to plug our website really quick, buffalotracedistillery.com. You can like hover your mouse over the map on the landing page, and you can actually click on the thing on the location, and it will tell you what the building is. So you don't actually have to be there to go exploring. You can also, go to our website and have some fun.
But you should go.
Oh, you have to go. It's a bucket list, mandatory.
100%.
You have to go. No excuses.
All right, we got a few more questions here. So Alvin Ogle asks, "What is your favorite part about working for Sazerac? What factor besides mash do you think makes Weller so distinguishable from your other labels?" So 2 questions in one.
Yeah. My favorite thing about Sazerac are the brands. I'm really, really proud of the attention to quality, and that came first, right? The juice always comes first, whether it's our bourbons, whether it's our rye, our cognac, the tequilas that we import or produce, our Indian single malts. Like the products are just so depth. So I am so proud to work for a company that has a big depth of portfolio. And also it's really exciting. I get to learn a lot. So that's probably my favorite thing, is exploring all these different things that are at my fingertips. So that was the first one. What do I think makes Weller stand out outside of the aging process? I think it's going to be, so basically I'm of the school of thought of at least 70% of the flavor comes from the barrel. So I think a lot of that has to do with placement in the warehouse as well. So not only how long it sits in the barrel, but where in the warehouse does it sit? And for Weller, what differentiates Weller is it kind of sits in the middle floors. It doesn't sit down on the bottom where Eagle Rare sits. And I think that what you get when you put a barrel its whole life down on the lower floors that are a little bit cooler, a little bit mustier maybe, they have that distinct nose to it, where Weller lives up above that. So it gets a little bit more impact from the wind, from the aeration. And I think that really contributes a lot to what makes Weller so well-rounded and a beautiful, just a beautiful bouquet of Kentucky.
So the perfect segue into the next question. It's a kind of a terroir question. So Matthew Archer has a question about the limestone. So limestone has a potential to be eroded by salt water and cause sinkholes. Has Buffalo Trace facility had any issues with sinkholes previously?
Not to my knowledge, no. That is one natural complication that has not hit the distillery. We've had a lot of other things. We have a lot of flooding. We've had a tornado hit, but I have not heard of any sinkhole. I will confirm with our bourbon archaeologist.
Drunk Indiana Jones.
With drunk Indiana Jones. So no, but I really like talking about the limestone water. I think it's an important thing to talk about. It's what makes bourbon from Kentucky, and why so much bourbon comes from there. So not only is the limestone water great to proof down your whiskey, to do all of these fun things, but also limestone water is so strong in calcium that's what makes whiskey. I mean, that's what makes the horses in Kentucky run so fast and be so strong. So the limestone is a really important thing to be a part of. I don't know that we've had any sinkholes, but now I'm going to follow up, and now I'm going to be terrified if that's like my biggest nightmare, is like falling into a sinkhole.
You just carry around a bottle of limestone water to feed the horse and buggy that you have parked outside?
I do. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Perfect. All right.
I love it.
Let's see here. All right. Pretty straightforward question here. Chris Coates asks, what is your favorite Weller and why?
Great question. My favorite Weller is Weller 107. I absolutely love that it's semi-available. Like, believe it or not, I don't have a stacked bar at home. I do have to go hunting for my own purchases a lot of the time, but I like that about it. And I like the original proof. I do like things that are uncut, unfiltered. So we do filter the 107, but we don't filter the 114. It's that kind of cusping
And
line.
that's non-chill filtered, right?
Correct. 114 is non-chill filtered. So what y'all are drinking tonight is non-chill filtered.
And what does that mean exactly? Because we've asked the question before, but for the
Yep.
people that don't know.
So what that means is we will take the whiskey once it is dumped into a batch, right? And we will cool it down to a point where the solids, the solubles, proteins, fats that are reminiscent of the grains from production will rise to the top because they get chilled down and they turn into solids. And then we basically, I think about it when you make bacon and then the bacon fat, the layer on top, and you can just scoop that out and you still have the bacon grease demo. It's a similar concept.
Right?
Yeah, I imagine there's a I've never seen it done, but in my mind there is a pool scooper, a pool skimmer that someone puts down into the whiskey and just skims that right off the top after it has separated. And the reason why we do chill filtration is mostly for aesthetic purposes. When a bottle of whiskey on a shelf gets below a certain temperature, you can start to see those solubles, and sometimes that's unattractive. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I told this story before on the call. One time I was at a restaurant and we had an ABC officer come in and do an inspection, and he pulled a bottle off the shelf of something that was non-chill filtered. So it had reached, there were some floaties in it. And I was trying to explain to him what non-chill filtered meant. And he said, "Oh no, there's something in the bottle that you need to throw this out." And I was like, no, watch this. And I just shook the bottle really hard, and all the protein, the solubles that had formed dissipated. And the look on his face, he thought, yeah, he was like, and then he still made me throw the bottle away. And I'm not going to argue with an ABC officer because I don't want to have any, I don't want our license to be affected. But I always was like, I looked at him, I was like, "Hey man, I'll do what you want, but I'm telling you that nothing's in the bottle. This is just a product of how the whiskey's made." And anyways, but I always go back to that story. I'm like, just shake the bottle hard. They'll go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Luckily, it wasn't. I don't think it was something super expensive, but I probably would have fought him harder on it. All right, getting to some more questions here. Linda Archer asks, is anyone in the Weller family still involved? You had mentioned the Van Winkle family was. Is anybody in the Weller family still involved?
No, not to my knowledge. When we purchased the brand, there was no family ties. So what happened actually during that time period when Stitzel Weller was selling off those other brands, the Van Winkle family said, we want to own our brand. So no one from the Weller family stepped up and said, we want to own our brand. So not to my knowledge. That being said, there are so many descendants of E.H. Taylor who live in Kentucky.
They come to the distillery. They're just like, where's my whiskey?
Yeah, it's incredible. We actually used to have an employee who was
my last name's Tyler. It's not Taylor, but
Oh man, well, but yeah. So not to my knowledge, no. I have never met a Weller. That's not a dog. Everyone names their dog Weller these days, which I love.
Fun fact. I think I've told this story before as well. I'm sorry. I have a French bulldog, and when I got him, I was deciding between two names, and one of the names was Julian, after Julian Van Winkle, and the other name was Dodger, which was my favorite. It's my favorite baseball team. And I said, I will know what to call him when I meet him. And we ultimately decided to call him Dodger, but I almost named him Julian after Julian Van Winkle. Cool. All right, let's get some more questions here. Rodney Archer asks, wouldn't refrigeration affect the aging process? And I think that's kind of the point, right? But that's the reason you do it, right? Because you want to slow down the aging to increase the yield.
Yes. So it is known throughout the industry that whiskey goes dormant at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you can keep something below 40 degrees, the whiskey's not going to be as active in the barrel. It'll just sit. And that's why Scotch whiskeys can age so long. So we are manipulating the aging process by cooling them down. We have done extensive research, and Carlin is a scientist beyond scientist. We have an entire warehouse called Warehouse X that is just for experimentation. And in that, we play a lot with cooling, heating, humidity, all these different things, and how does it affect the barrel. So we know, and it's down to a science where the flavor profile is going to sit that we're happy with, that we can then get that extra age on it. So it will have an impact on the barrel, but we won't lose as much angel share. Right now, Sazerac 18 year, just for a reference point, Sazerac 18 year is yielding 24% of its original fill.
Wow.
That's not enough. So we are trying to find the sweet spot in the flavor, and then
That's
slow
probably
the
why each year. I mean, I know that Stag or George C. Stag, and there have been less and less every year, right? So that probably is what affects that.
Yeah, so it does affect the aging, but we do not feel that it will affect the flavor because of this extensive research that we've done of like kind of when to let it sit and slowly start to age more gracefully over time.
Awesome. We got a few more questions here. I know we're approaching an hour here, so
good. It's still raining out here, so I'm not going anywhere.
All right. So Jordan Racy asks, how does Sazerac feel about the secondary market versus the MSRP, essentially? And does that bother Buffalo Trace at all, as far as what they see bottles going for MSRP versus what they go on secondary market?
Yes, it bothers us. Yes.
Right, rightfully so.
Yes, we suggest a retail price for a reason. And we do suggest our retail prices based off of what we think is fair to the consumer. So it is frustrating to us. Unfortunately, legally speaking, once we sell the bottles to our distributor and then they're then sold to a retailer, we no longer own those bottles. So we can't mandate pricing or whatnot. All we can do is suggest. So we strongly suggest our SRPs, and when you see things going, and people get mad at us all the time, and our hands are tied, unfortunately. So yeah, it's not the best in the world. Is it nice to know that your bourbons are in that high of demand? Sure. Is it sad that not everybody can enjoy them because of that? Absolutely. So I always say, if you have a real issue with it, contact your district attorney and let them know that price gouging is going on. Yeah. That's like all the advice we can give you at this point. We always keep waiting for the bust, right? So this is a boom of bourbon. Is there going to be a bust when people just don't want to buy it anymore? And are those prices then going to come back to kind of a neutral zone? Or when we have more available, are they going to come down? We hope so, but we have no control. So, bummer.
All right. Couple more questions here. Trisha Parker asks, what is your most memorable experience to date working for Sazerac?
Oh boy, what a question. Oh my gosh. Okay, I have two. My first love is tequila. Just so we all know, my first trip with Sazerac was to Jalisco and to go see some tequila distilleries in outside of Guadalajara. And I went to this distillery called Siete Leguas, which is we import the brand. It's my favorite tequila, and it was the most magical day of my life. I honestly cannot tell you how blessed I felt in that moment. It is second and third generation owned. His father and son right now are owning this distillery. So Mexican owned. They still use boros to pull their Tahona stone, which is just like you're transported back into this like beautiful moment of history and like timelessness. It was the best day of my life, and I have been back 5 times since then. So that's my most memorable moment for Sazerac as a whole.
Siete Lagos is amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm obsessed with it. And they do some single barrels. They're starting to dabble in single barrel aging as well, so that's kind of cool. Maybe they can get on board. But my other really the best day is it was the day that I realized Freddie Johnson was actually my coworker. Like that moment was it for me. It was like, wow, like this really means so much to the distillery and so much to bourbon and so much to everybody that has ever met him. If you have had the privilege of meeting him, I know you have. It was that day of realization where I think I posted on Instagram.
One of the best human beings I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah, I got this job. I got this promotion during the pandemic. So I actually was at Buffalo Trace Distillery, and Freddie and I were on a tour, and we're wearing masks, and we have pictures of us like in the warehouse with our masks on. And I posted to Instagram, and that's by far my most memorable Buffalo Trace experience is that moment.
Well, you've led to the perfect segue of teasing information for next month. And Katie, you obviously are always an amazing guest, and we made the joke of, you being, I think the guest that's been on the most times, 3 times, we'll work on your jacket. But next month we will have Freddie on our call to talk about Buffalo Trace and Eagle Rare.
I want to crash it. Send me a link. You don't have to send me a bottle, just send me a link.
And if you don't know who Freddie Johnson is, look him up. He's an absolute legend. He was inducted into the Bourbon Hall of Fame a few years back, and just one of the nicest, kindest people in the world. And Katie, you're just slightly a runner-up to Freddie. I'm sorry.
I have to work. I mean, he has a couple years on me.
Yeah, just a couple.
I got to get seasoned a little bit. So
awesome.
Thanks for the opportunity over here.
All right. We are just over an hour here. So let's run through these questions and let's pick some winners. So we have the question about being a brand ambassador, telling us something we don't know about Sazerac. We have the question about what's your favorite part about working for Sazerac? Question about, let me go through here, the limestone question and the sinkholes. What's your favorite Weller and why? The question about the Weller family still being involved or not. The question about refrigeration affecting the process. The question about the secondhand market and how Buffalo Trace feels about that. Most memorable experience in the industry.
Yeah. So I definitely did enjoy that last question a lot. It brought me back into memory. So that's one of my votes for sure. For the other one, all right, let me take 2 seconds and just decide. I'm intrigued about the limestone. So I'm going to say the limestone. Yeah, because now I want to go.
Were there any sinkholes? Let's talk to Indiana Jones. We got to find it out.
I'm so intrigued now. And did we take precautions? Because I didn't know that that's what limestone causes. So did we take precautions when drilling down deep? Is there extra security down there? Should I be terrified every time I'm at the distillery?
Yeah.
So those are my 2 picks.
All right. So it was the limestone and the your most memorable experience.
Yes.
Okay. Just because I love the term drunk Indiana Jones, I'm going to go with limestone for the first prize.
Nice.
And I'm going to go with the most memorable experience as second. So Matthew Archer, we got some rad swag coming your way for first place winner. And then Trisha Parker, we got some other cool swag coming your way for second place. Katie, I can't thank you enough. Your time is always appreciated. You are just a wealth of knowledge and one of my favorite people to talk to in the whiskey industry. And I'm sure you'll be part of the Four-Timer Club. You're the first to break the Four-Timer Club sometime next year. And I
have a quick question for you. Do
Sure.
you pick your barrels at the distillery, or do you get samples?
It depends. I've done both. But it just depends on my schedule. I mean, we have 30 restaurants, so I'm
that's the crazy part. I'm like, call me next time. Let me know when you're going into a decision making. I would love to watch you guys pick a barrel, or like be around and like just kind of be a fly on the wall. I think it'd be really cool because that's a big undertaking.
I'm sure I'll see you at Vibe. Are you going to be at Vibe next year?
If it's in SoCal, I try to be there. Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, we'll discuss it offline. But thank you so much, Katie. You're amazing. Can't thank you enough for your time. And have a good night, everyone. Enjoy your Weller Foolproof. And again, if you have been a member for 1 year or longer, look out. Hope you should have got an email today and go donate to the Maui cause and the Maui fires. They need our help. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much. Cheers.